Welcome to the MPFFU Podcast. The intent and purpose of the MPFFU Podcast is to support the mission to improve wages, working hours, and working conditions for its members. This podcast will disseminate evidence-based relevant information, resources, and strategies. To accomplish this, the MPFFU Podcast will provide reliable, factual, and actionable information that strengthens, empowers, and supports the MPFFU members and locals through united action. Now our host, Jeff Lassers.
Thank you, Matt. I'm honored to have the opportunity to produce and host the MPFFU Podcast. Hello, everyone. I'm Jeff Lassers, and I've been a firefighter paramedic with the West Bloomfield Township Fire Department, Local 1721, since 2004. Over the last few years, I've become a semi-self-taught podcast producer and host. I've been lucky enough to work with some great people along the way that have helped me understand what to do and what not to do. My job in this role is to help establish and maintain the communication vehicle that is the MPFFU Podcast and empower our members through a constant stream of reliable and relevant information. This is our very first podcast episode, and we're very excited. To kick off the MPFFU Podcast, we sit down with Matt Sahr, who you heard in the intro. Matt is the relatively newly elected MPFFU President as well as a firefighter paramedic with the Eastpointe Fire Department. We're also joined by Terry Chesney, the Godfather himself, a retired Trenton firefighter and longtime MPFFU Secretary Treasurer who is a fountain of knowledge and experience for all things MPFFU. Finally, our conversation also includes Michael O'Haron, who is the MPFFU's longtime legal counsel. During this episode, our guest will help us appreciate the value and understand the role, functions, and structure of the International Association of Firefighters, or IAFF, and the Michigan Professional Firefighters Union, or MPFFU. Then we will describe how members can get informed, educated, and involved with the IAFF and MPFFU initiatives and functions. I really enjoyed my time with Matt, Terry, and Michael, and I learned a lot. This turned out to be a clear, concise, and informative episode which will provide all of our members with a fresh look at a well-established organization. You can find more details related to today's topics as well as a list of our guests in the show notes. Like I said, this is our first show and there's always room to improve, so please email us your feedback and tell us what you think about the show, or send us ideas for future episodes to mpffupodcast@gmail.com. Also, check out the new MPFFU Instagram account at m.p.f.f.u. And finally, please subscribe to the Michigan Professional Firefighter Union YouTube channel, where you'll find all sorts of informative and funny podcast content. Thank you, and enjoy the show. Good morning, everybody. How are we?
Great.
Good. Excellent.
Thanks for being here today. We're here at the AFL-CIO building in the Michigan Professional Firefighters Union office here in Lansing, Michigan. Let's kick us off. Matt Sahr, who are you, what do you do, and where do you do it?
Good morning, Jeff. Matt Sahr, Michigan Professional Firefighters President. I was elected here just this past March. I'm serving a 2-year term, so I'm just a few months into my new term. Been in the fire service for 20 years, active as a firefighter paramedic in the city of Eastpointe.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for being here. You are the new president. You're taking us into the future doing podcasts and all sorts of digital media. It is 2022, so I guess it's time to do that. And one of the guys we're bringing along is Terry Chesney. Terry, introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and where you do it.
Morning, Jeff. Glad to be here. I'm the Secretary Treasurer for the Michigan Professional Firefighters Union. I'm a retired Trenton firefighter. Been retired now for 12 years. Worked for 28 years there. I retired as a captain. 22 years I've been a Secretary Treasurer. So I've been fortunate enough to work with several presidents, almost 20 district vice presidents, and I've learned a lot from all of them. I enjoy what I do.
It's so important that an organization has institutional memory in the room. It's so important. It's nice to be able to call people that did what you did, but having somebody who's been around forever, it's an untapped resource. It's like a cheat code a lot of times because they've seen all the problems we're having now in a different form with a different name on it.
Yes.
You know?
He is the sitting godfather of our union. He's been there. He's seen it. When we have issues, we give him a call, and he's like, oh, yeah, I remember that. He talks a lot about our website being a library. He himself is that library that helps tie a lot of the things together for our DVPs, for our committees, or our lobbyist, Melissa McKinley. He does all those things effortlessly when you talk with him. It's encouraging, and it's great to have him. Good team.
Great resource to have. Michael O'Haron, who are you? Speaking of institutional memory and information.
I am Michael O'Haron. I'm the General Counsel to the Michigan Professional Firefighters Union. I am privileged to be serving my third state president. I was appointed originally by Paul Huffnagel. I served Mark Doherty's entire administration, and I look forward to serving with Matt in the future. I represent quite a few locals around the state as well as the state unions, so I have a unique perspective on the ground level and the meta level at the state as far as legislative goals that we have and the agenda carried from the top down, and I'm proud to be a part of that.
Fantastic. All right, guys, let's get into appreciating and understanding the value of the IAFF and the MPFFU. Now, Terry, we've talked in the past about really what your first principles are, and that's that we are the IAFF and the MPFFU. Give everybody listening some context there. What do you mean by that?
Well, a lot of members want to say the union did this or the union did that, and really we're all the union. There's two letters in the word union, you and I, and that's what unionism is. Sure, we have an executive board, we have a good team that helps us do our jobs as executive board people, but the union's everybody, whether you're active or not active. If you're in the union, you're responsible for what happens with our union and how we serve our members. The members decide that.
Absolutely.
So, Terry, that is a very good, effective way of looking at it, but mechanically, the union can be broken down into essentially two things for Michigan's professional firefighters, the International Association of Firefighters and then the Michigan Professional Firefighters Union. What is the IAFF? Give everybody an overview.
In very simple terms, the IAFF is the organization that all of our members and our unions here in the state belong to. You have to belong to the IAFF before you can belong to the Michigan Professional Firefighters Union. And they're responsible for numerous things, but in simplistic terms, they handle the federal stuff, and all the states handle the stuff that goes on in each state, especially legislatively. They're not in a position to have the international in all 50 states, but by having state associations, we can do the work that needs to be done within the state of Michigan because we have the expertise, the knowledge, and we're here as opposed to being in Washington, D.C. So they have a lot of resources. They provide a lot of the information and knowledge to do our jobs here in the state, but ultimately the MPFFU is who our locals work with directly.
So, Matt, the IAFF is a hub. The MPFFU is a spoke.
Absolutely. We're part of that spoke that helps move our union forward. Part of those other spokes are all of our locals. All of our locals help move our entire union forward. When one of our locals stumble, it becomes a stumbling block for all of our locals, right? So we try to use that, like the education piece, getting them the resources that Terry talked about that we have at the international and our homegrown experts we have here at home to get them educated, keep that wheel spinning, help us stay a strong union.
So the MPFFU's job as that spoke is to really help the statewide interest and span of control on behalf of its members by way of locals, right?
Yep.
Mike, give us your perspective as legal counsel. What is the IAFF and MPFFU, but more specifically, why do they exist from that perspective?
Well, the primary purpose of any union, and the IAFF and the MPFFU is no exclusion there, is to work tirelessly to accomplish the best wages, hours, and terms and conditions of employment for our members that we can get. The primary vehicle for that is collective bargaining. And the international and the state union are really repositories of tremendous resources to assist member locals in bargaining the best collective bargaining agreement that they can bargain for their members. Very often, I had mentioned that I represent several locals. Very often, I'll have a union president ask me about a particular issue, and the first thing I'll tell them is talk to your district vice president. Your district vice president is your connection to the state union, and the state union is your connection to the international. And when you can tap into that network and you don't have to reinvent the wheel on every issue you confront, you can save money on legal fees, and you can accomplish a better result at the bargaining table.
So the international allows us a structure for how it should look on the big scale, that 30,000-foot view. our state and provincial organizations like the MPFFU kind of overview the nuances of that specific state, because Michigan is not Nevada or California. We have different humans and, we have snow. Some people don't. So we have different safety issues, right? And then we get down to the locals, which happen to take care of those specific memberships within inside of a district. So like anything else, it's really a chain of command structure and not really a hierarchy, but really a scaffolding to allow everybody throughout the membership who makes up these organizations successful in what they're doing. And so I think, Mike, you hit it hard on the very first big value of why these exist, and that is collective voice and representation of the membership. Collective bargaining is a big deal. Terry, can you kind of talk about the strengths and numbers with collective bargaining and having a collective voice and the value of why it's important to me as a MPFFU and IAFF member?
Well, if you think about where you work in a local, if you had to, on your own, walk across the city hall and try to determine what your wages and benefits are going to be, you wouldn't have a lot of strength or ammunition to make that happen. But by being in a union collectively and sending your agent bargaining to City Hall, you have one powerful voice because you're speaking for all the members.
Probably the most important thing is that collective voice, one voice coming from the union. Our strongest unions are the ones that are sticking together when they're going to bargain a contract. You'll hear, we just got to know how to talk to somebody, right? That'll get the contract done.
Right.
But ultimately what comes down to is that one union working together. They have the same goals, and they might be divided a little bit when they're in a union meeting, but they come out united, and then they're united against the employer for the betterment of their union, whether it be, the wages, hours, working conditions. Those are obviously our core issues. Those are mandatory subjects of bargaining, and those things have to be carried forward. We can get caught up in the weeds on a lot of different things in our local unions, but ultimately it comes back to working together for what is most important to our members, and that's obviously keeping our wages strong, keeping those working conditions, right? What's the safety things that are going to keep your members well into retirement? That's what our goal is to do, right?
Right. One of the things that we're really good at first responder communities, especially in the fire service, is mutual aid in helping out our local partnering communities. We have professional fire departments all around the area that I work, so we're always responding to and with them to things to help them and vice versa. But the same concept, Mike, can be held true in unions. We can certainly tap into knowledge and information of locals, leaders, whether they're in our district leaders or at our local level, that have been there, done that, when another local is facing a challenge. So don't you see that there's a mutual aid respect to this as well by opening up those lines of communication, having this collective bargaining at a state level of understanding with communication, and then getting that local level?
Absolutely. And really, I think the benefits to your local of your state and international affiliation are there whether you notice them or not. Like you said, we have a lot of mutual aid where locals get into a bind with their employer and locals surrounding them bring people into town to distribute literature, show up at a city council or a township board meeting, and engage in collective activity to show solidarity and strength. And even when we don't bring that pressure to bear on your specific employer, I can't tell you how many times I've gotten calls from management lawyers saying, listen, we want to work this out with you. We're not interested in having firefighters from all over the state in our city council meeting. We want to get this done right here. That's invaluable because we don't have to even threaten to bring everybody in. They know that we can. It's a hard thing to wrap your head around, the value of your employer knowing the strength of your own union. The tragedy I run across too often is our own members and some even local executive board members that don't have the same appreciation. Your employer actually understands that you could rain hell down on them just because of who you are with.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the value of having such a well-structured organization with so many people in it and all of us pulling in the same direction when we do is extremely powerful. So the only thing that empowers that to get even stronger is having what already exists is a structured network of communication channels used to identify, collect, and organize the needs from and to the membership, right? So one of the biggest assets to help maybe quench that or help to make sure that the information is spread in a consistent manner is tapping into our district vice presidents. Matt, what are the districts and who are the district vice presidents?
We have our first third district, that is the Upper Peninsula and the east side near the Thumb area. Chris Reynolds is our first third district vice president. And then we come south down to Scott Balo, who's in the 6th. And then we have over here in the Lansing area would be Monty Nye, and he goes all the way down over by Indiana. Don't forget the 4th district where Terry's from, former 4th district VP. Steve Heim covers all of Wayne County and Washtenaw. Then we have the 2nd district vice president, which is Rich Clark, which is like the Grand Rapids west side of the state.
What do they do?
So the district vice presidents are responsible for the locals that are within that district, and they help with day-to-day operations when they have questions or concerns. So we might get a new local in, they might need some training on, hey, how do I run a union meeting? Which you can find that information right on our website. There's actually a document on there that says how to run a union meeting. When they contact Scott Bayless, say there's a new local, he's going to go in there through the international to help settle their first contract, and he's going to start teaching them from day one, like, hey, this is how you run a union, this is how you negotiate. These are the things that you're supposed to do to be successful. And then it's incumbent upon them to continue on that education. Our district VPs also will help very well-established local that might be having contract issues, or they may have a odd disciplinary case, and they call them to bounce ideas off of them. And when they don't know, they'll call myself or Terry. Multiple times they've given us a call and said, hey, have you ever heard this before? Honestly, there's a lot of times where I'm like, no, that's a new one. This when you think you've heard it all, you're like, whoa, I never heard that one. You better call Mike. We go from there. So our district vice presidents are extremely hardworking. They have a lot of locals. They're supposed to be staying in contact with them on a monthly or as needed basis so they can keep those things being updated. And they do a great job, every one of them.
Okay, so district vice presidents are a very integral part between the MPFFU and the locals, right? Because they basically represent a bunch of separate locals that have their own issues. Some of them have problems with maybe administration. Some of them are fighting their own people. Some of them might even have problems at their township or city government level. It's always the same, but it's always different. But we have a person to go to and a mechanism to get that information. And then there's these district meetings. Terry, what is the intent and purpose of these district meetings, and what do they do?
Well, the district meetings bring together the locals that are in each district. In addition to providing them information from Matt or myself and our attorney, maybe our lobbyist, then they get a chance to stand up and talk about issues that are going on in their locals. And that's, I think, the real value of the district meetings, in addition to the information we give them, is they do find out that many of the problems are similar. And so you're not facing something that somebody else hasn't already addressed. And so Matt's right. We do hear some new stuff more often than it used to be, but most of the time somebody else has already had a similar problem. And you can share that information and at least see how somebody else handled it. I think that's a very crucial component to the district meetings. The networking that we do before the meeting, during dinner maybe or lunch, certainly afterwards, a lot of information gets shared between locals that never gets written down anywhere, or it's not out there during the meeting. But I think it's very important for every local to be represented at our district meetings. We do those twice a year, usually in the fall, another one in the spring. Done a couple of Zoom ones during COVID.
Well, yeah, you kind of need to.
And that worked out fairly well, but they missed out on that important networking stuff. So
there's certainly something that happens when you get a bunch of people together, and it's even more special when they're firemen who've been socially greased with the right liquids and foods, right?
Yeah.
So they're always a really fun event. The best thing I like about them, selfishly, is that I see people there that I rarely ever see. And so, you know, when I see Mickey the first time in a long time, it's like, there's my buddy Mick. And then I see guys like Rob Scott, who I don't get a chance to see very much. It's nice to run into those people. So there's always that ancillary benefit.
Right.
Yeah.
But Mike, you and I were talking like it's really beneficial to really take advantage of networking when you're around people who do the same thing you do professionally, and to have the nuance of being in a union as a local leader or any part of their executive function. Comment on that for me.
Yeah, that's right. I think, again, some of the biggest values of this organization are somewhat passive, and you might not even notice them if you're not paying attention. You develop these friendships, or even if they're not friendships, they're at least acquaintances with people who are similarly situated to you in other communities. And you might read something on the MPFFU website about what another local's going through. And you know the president or the vice president of that local, and you say, oh, I went through this 6 months ago, and this is how I fixed it. I'm going to call that guy and tell him what happened. It extends after the meeting is over by a long shot. It's really important to get that feeling of solidarity with your brothers and sisters in other locals that you generally only get when you rub shoulders with them and break bread with them and commiserate with them about what you're going through. And you see that common ground that we all have, that we're all just fighting for a fair shot for what we do. And we're all up against this seemingly arbitrary and monolithic power structure.
Right.
And, it's always like a David and Goliath thing. And I'm glad we're David, and I'm glad David wins in the end. I read that book.
Yeah.
It's a fairly popular book.
The networking is where it's at. You're sitting at the table, and there'll be two other local presidents or members of their local talking at a table, and the third person overhears what they're talking about, and they either put that in the back of their mind, and they go, okay, that's something to take in, and they go back to their department, and inevitably that thing happens, and they go, man, I heard those guys talking about that. That is happening here, or I have that guy at my local. I personally experienced that multiple times, whether it would be a seminar or Novi. You're there. You're networking, you're having a drink, you're hanging out with the guys, and you hear the stories, and you go, man, that exact same thing's happening at my department. What are you doing about it? How can I work on that to get the results that you got? I think it's absolutely a must that we get our locals into these district meetings.
Absolutely. Now, that is one gathering point. The other big gathering point is the conventions. So the conventions, as it turns out, is the place where all of our membership gets together and makes decisions, voting in officers, elected officials within our organization, but also identifying the objectives and goals of each one of our committees. And that's the big one, because you say, what did they do, the IAFF? What did they do, the MPFFU? Well, literally, we, the membership, decide that in the form of objectives, and then those are carried out by the various committees. So as we learn through the first 7 or 8 episodes here on the MPFFU podcast, or whatever we name this thing, we're definitely going to give you the first introduction and meet the leaders, or at least those people who are managing and coordinating those committees to carry out those objectives. Not their objectives, our objectives. Union Education Committee. Terry, what do they do?
Well, their primary purpose is to come up with programs and classes, basically, to help educate our members. One of the biggest changes I've seen since I've been the Secretary Treasurer is the turnover that we have at the local union leadership level. Back in the day, we would have union officers be the president for 10, 15, 20 years. I was a local president for 21 years, and I can tell you the last contract I negotiated, I had a lot better understanding of what to do than my very first contract. Now we seem to have a lot of turnover, and people only stay in office for 1 or 2 terms, and then you bring a new person in again. So educating these people on how to negotiate contracts not only affects their local, but it affects neighboring locals that use that local as a comparable. The Union Education Committee, I think, is very, very important.
So the Union Education Committee essentially allows us to have a standardized approach mechanically to going after all the objectively litigious things we have to go through, whether it's knowing how to set up your e-board, knowing how to grieve the township, knowing how to call upon Mike O'Haron, what his number is.
Right.
Just kidding. Matt, what's our Political Education Committee do?
So our Political Education Committee chairman is Scott Bala, who's also the 6th District Vice President. The primary focus of our Political Education Committee is obviously to move our agenda as a state union forward and help promote getting people involved within our PAC committee. Right now, they're currently working on getting a store online so we can go online and buy some T-shirts, which obviously guys like the swag, right? They want a shirt, they want a pullover, they want a hoodie. That'll be money that we can use towards our PAC fund, which goes towards supporting our own candidates. Also, when we have important bills going on, whether it would be in the past, it was we were fighting for our cancer presumption fund. The Political Education Committee was all over it. They were the ones that helped set it up lobby days. So they're out there trying to help with that and talking with senators and representatives and help pushing our agenda forward. And quite honestly, they also served myself in our e-board. If we need the Political Education Committee, like, hey, we have a hot topic, we're going to move forward on it. Right now, I want them to get together our issues book, which would be the issues that are important to us. So we can get that on paperback that we can hand out to all the new legislators coming in. As people are probably sick of hearing right now, seeing all the political ads, every one of the House and Senate seats are up, as well as the governor. Everything's up. So we're going to have a whole new legislator come in. And so we want to be able to hit the ground running and get them our issues book, things that are important to us.
Fantastic. All right, the next committee we'll be learning about is the Health and Safety Committee, and it's pretty obvious what they do. It's nothing new there. You know, we're talking about PFAS, we're talking about better gear, we're talking about living longer, having better lives. Yeah. But one thing that's newer to the fire service, and it shouldn't be newer, but it is a better diet. And one of the people we're bringing in is Maureen Stockline, who's now with the Detroit Tigers. Yeah. She used to be a Canton firefighter paramedic, a professional in the MPFFU, and she's going to join us to help talk about what we need to be doing more with our bodies, putting into it and putting out with our bodies there. And that committee exists really to assure that all of our locals have the best information to assure they're getting the best equipment, the best standards to keep them healthy and safe. Yeah. Anything to add to that, guys?
You kind of nailed it there. I mean, all of our committees are working together. Our Health and Safety Committee is working with our new one, which is the behavioral health, because we know that we need sleep because sleep can cause other kind of behavioral health issues. Right. So our Political Education Committee is working with our union education, right? Because you got to get the guys educated to know that, hey, you have to be involved in politics. I don't know, Terry maybe can tell me, I don't know which IAFF leader said it first, but we'll stop being involved in politics when they stop being involved in firefighting. I don't know who said that, but that's
anonymous. I love it.
It's the truth.
Some guy with a cool mustache said it, I guarantee
so
it.
we can never stop being involved. And so all of our committees, right down to EMS committee, people don't understand how important the EMS committee is. Monty and I has been doing a fantastic job for over 20 years on this EMS committee. So every time they put out a new protocol or they want to come up with a new licensure or how old you have to be, Monty's all over it. Gives me a call. Hey, I'm doing this. Just heard this. What do you think? And I'm like, man, you're the expert. You tell me. So they're all working together in conjunction. So when we talk about one of these committees, it might not feel like it all the time because they're not all sitting in the same room, but they're all working together.
So the convention identifies the objectives from its members, say, we want these committees to carry out these things over this time frame. And then those committees carry that out, but then synergize and leverage each other's assets to help each other. Like you said, mental health is better if our health and safety is better, right? Mental health is better if my political leaders are giving me presumption on cancer and mental health problems. On and on and on. Recruitment and retention, all the things play off of each other. So that's the structure that kind of carries out the mission. Now that we know what the MPFFU is, how it is, and who it is, let's talk about how our members can get informed, educated, and involved with IAFF and MPFFU initiatives and functions. First, let's reinforce something Terry had to say. It's really important that we all come home with the mission that we are already involved, whether we know it or not. Whether you're going to meetings, whether you're voting on local issues, whether you're going to district meetings, whether you care or know who Michael Heron is or Matt Sahr or Terry Chesney, you're already involved. You could sit on the bench or you don't have to. But I think getting involved in the progression of participation is really important. And I think one of the biggest things we've talked about is rule number 1 is start by attending and engaging your local meetings.
You just said it. You can be on the bench and find out what's going on third or fourth or fifth hand at the kitchen table in the fire station, or you can go to the meeting, hear it said directly by the people that are giving the information, and you get a chance to raise your hand and offer your own opinion and ask questions. Not going to the meeting and then trying to figure out what was said or complain about something or why didn't you ask this question? You know, you need to go yourself and ask those questions if you have concerns. And that's where it starts. You got to attend the meetings.
So if I'm attending the meetings all the time, Matt, what's the next engagement for me? So like I've been there, I've learned the mechanics. What's the next natural progression?
If you want to get involved with your union, you can run for your local executive board. That's not always what everybody wants to do. Not everybody wants to be on their e-board. So what you can do, which is the most important thing, is support your local e-board. One of the hardest things you'll hear, at least I remember, or even sitting in union meetings now, is someone says, the union should do this. It's like, that's all of us. What do you mean? So what are you saying? Do you have a motion that we should do something? Let's make a motion then. So, the one thing that you could do best is support your local e-board.
In the form of that, maybe sometimes you don't have the time or capacity to be an executive of it, right? But what about projects? Maybe they need somebody to do some research to get some information. Maybe they need somebody to do a fill to boot. There's all these extra things I think that we can all get involved with, no matter how busy we are, to support your e-board. Because, like my local president, sometimes I feel bad for the guy. He puts a lot of time and energy into this, and I'm always like, maybe there is something I can do to make his life easier.
Well, that's exactly what I meant when I said support your local e-board, whether it's a charity event. Hey, I need somebody to go pick up our T-shirts. A lot of times it's the same core group of guys. So maybe, when you get that extra helping hand, it means a lot.
Absolutely.
Another way that you can help, many of our locals have the ability to trade time. You don't want to be involved on a regular basis, but certainly if there's an opportunity to maybe work for one of your executive board members so they can come to Lansing and do stuff, or they can go to City Hall and argue on your behalf on an issue, that's another way to be involved. And many of our locals do that.
Absolutely. Sometimes you got to send in the lefty, right? You got to call in the right person. That person's, driving engine 1 today. Well, we got to get him off engine 1 and get him in this game because we need him over here today. We could fill that other position. Now, I get knowledge, I get informed of my union, my local, I get involved in projects, I want to serve on my local e-board, I've done it all. What's the pathway to be one of these committee members and or chair people?
Well, if you want to join one of our committees, you have to put in an application, and we do that every 2 years. And when you submit your application, your local union president will sign off on it, and then we'll go through the names, and then we'll see if you're a good fit, and we'll appoint you to one of those committees. And a lot of that time it comes with experience or not. Right now, we currently have a lot of our committees. There's a lot of people without any experience. So we're happy to have them and train them. You have to start somewhere.
You guys have both been leaders in union locals and state levels. Mike, you go to a lot of locals and a lot of state level meetings and districts. As somebody who's always in the firehouse and other places, proverbially and literally, what is that value that you see from the outside and that natural progression of growth and understanding the union?
It is a grassroots organization, and this discussion that we've been having about getting involved is a pet issue of mine. I have periodically at district meetings and conventions talked about how it's my personal belief that locals should amend their constitution and bylaws to include a requirement that new members, once they're off probation, serve on a local committee. Not necessarily at the state level right out of the box, but every local has work that needs to be done, and it can't all be done by your executive board. I have sat at bargaining tables with countless new employees who were at the bargaining table for the first time, and invariably, when the door closes and the employer walks out, I hear, "Oh my God, is it always like this?" And the answer is, yeah, it's always like this. But anyone who hasn't put in the time to at least show up and see it for themselves doesn't know. And they do say things like, what's the union doing? Why didn't the union get this when they were bargaining? Well, come look and see why.
Why did you only get me X? Why didn't you do this? Oh, you got to know how to talk to them. It's like, well, wait a minute. Do you understand? Have you been in the room? Do you understand that it's not about how you talk to somebody? There's a lot more than just that personal relationship that goes for bargaining. Mike used to always say, when I was a younger local executive board member and he came over, he'd say, "You're not working for McDonald's, right? This is a multi-million-dollar contract." I use it all the time. To this day, when I have a new e-board that comes in, I go, "Hey, you're negotiating a multi-million-dollar contract. You got to get educated. We have to bring our professionalism in on this." So
really talking about people's lives here. And I think having the information and understanding the network allows us to leverage our representatives and resources like having a cheat code. If Terry's been there 100 times and I've been there one time, and I say, "Terry, how do I do this?" Lucky me, I don't have to go through the same hurdles Terry did.
I'm going to start calling them cheat code.
It's a great way to look at it. You got to have somebody around who's your cheat code. So based on our conversation, we need to leverage our representatives and resources. Local e-board is available to guide our local members. Our district VPs are dedicated to serving each local. The district meetings allow us to establish and gathering points and to facilitate education, network, and camaraderie amongst our entire membership district. Talk about all these things in a very effective and fun way, knowing there's a structure of committees to carry out what we want them to do from the beginning. And so as we close out, we hope that everybody understands this podcast is going to be designed to get that information out to everybody amongst all the other ways that we send out information. And you need to tune into the information stream. That means by turning on your email notifications from Terry and the MPFFU, checking out the IAFF and MPFFU websites, and then also our social media channels on Instagram and, are we going anywhere else yet?
Instagram, Facebook. We're soon to have the TikTok as soon as we get this podcast up and going.
Can't wait to see you on TikToks doing the finger point word dance thing. Maybe Mike O'Haron will do the cha-cha-cha.
That's how we're doing.
So as we close out, guys, we really have created this podcast to take everything we talked about here in about 40 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it's going to turn out to be, get it out to everybody and just give them a taste. So as we really put out this information of this podcast and all the subsequent information, we're hoping that everybody listening uses it to then look into the information we share with them. Don't just take our words for it. Get active. Any closing thoughts?
Well, one thing I can say is I'm the only one sitting here that gets paid to do this union work, and it isn't really affecting my life. You just got done saying this is all about people's lives and their livelihoods, and to tie back into the main theme is it's your life and your livelihood. If you can't get out and get active for yourself and your own family, who are you going to do it for?
That's a good point.
He's right.
That is all for the show today, everybody. Thank you to Matt Sahr, Terry Chesney, and Michael O'Haron for joining me on our very first episode of the MPFFU Podcast. I hope all of our listeners enjoyed this show. Remember, this is our first show and there's always room to improve. So please email us your feedback and tell us what you think about this show to mpffupodcast@gmail.com. Also, check out the new MPFFU Instagram account at m.p.f.f.u. And finally, please subscribe to the Michigan Professional Firefighters Union YouTube channel, where you can find all sorts of informative and funny podcast content. Have a great day.